Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, or if this is your first time here, hi, my name is Carrington. Not your first time here, hi, welcome back. So glad you guys have found me and this video. If this is your first time here, I absolutely invite you to subscribe, click the little bell to be notified of all my future uploads. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy, and let's go ahead and let's dive on into today's video, which is I'm going to be ranking the 14 books that I read in August. Yes, I read 14 books in August. I was shocked, like very shocked that I was able to read that much, but maybe I'm not, because I also have discovered the best way for me to read my books. So I read 14. That's probably the most I read in a month in a long time. So let's go ahead and let's just get to cracking and just ranking and breaking everything down from my least favorite to my most favorite. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to start off with the first three that are on the bottom. These are going to be my number 14, 13, and 12, and they're all part of the exact same series. I had read the rest, so this is a series called Raised by a Killer, and generally it's going through like Deicide's life, and her dad's a serial killer, and it kind of like delves more into like her upbringing, and then it takes a weird turn. I thought it had ended with number 7, so I got books numbers 8, 9, and 10. This is supposed to be the last of the series. I hope so, but these books are just not that good. Now, these are an extreme horror novel, and let me tell you, anything extreme that could happen in books have happened in these books. Let's just preface it by saying every trigger warning that you could probably think of is probably in this book. Let's just get that out of the way. But now that that's out of the way, that is not why I hate these books. First of all, I hate the way that these are written. These are written so poorly. The reason being is because on the book, it literally talks about it's from the point of view of Deicide. Now, there's one book in here that is not, and that's going to be this one right here, and that's through the dad's point of view. So what I really hate about these books is that it'll literally be in third person. Like, it'll be like, Deicide said, blah, blah, blah. Deicide went and did XYZ. Pops went and did. Alec went and did. You know, like, everybody's talked about in third person. But then you will get little snippets of, that's like italicized. Where it's like italicized, where it's talking about what's going on in her head from a first person point of view. But you never see anybody else's point of view in their minds, except for the Pops book where it's through Pops. But for the rest of the books, it talks about Deicide, it's through her eyes. So why we are in her brain for the italicized portions and then using third party for everything else is just weird to me. I think this could have been so much better and better written if we just stuck with Deicide telling the story how it is. I think that would have been just markedly better. Like, the writing was just so poor. There are quite a few like spelling or grammatical errors, or sometimes there will be words where you're just like, okay, there's 2 words. These 2 words don't go together to make this sentence. So either I can use the first word and exchange the last word for something else, and that would make sense. Or I could exchange the first word and keep the last word, and it would still make sense. So sometimes you're just kind of like, I'm not really for sure what she was trying to say. But I mean, these are really quick books. I mean, they're really quick read. They're like 150, 180 pages each. I can usually read one of those in a day. I can usually read 1.5 in a day. So they're really quick read. But on top of just like the poor writing, the books are just so outlandish. Like, the things that happen, it's just like, wow, that is like the most outlandish thing. And I really feel like the direction the books were going originally, where it starts off with Deicide being 4 and like her dad's a serial killer and how she has to help and participate and how she has to be taught what she can and can't say in public or to other people, or like the importance of like why they're killing people for like the sanctity of meat, and like that I felt like was like so good, so captivating. And then it went into like this random cult, and the police never wonder anything, and these are just my least favorite. But honestly, Book number 8 from this month is going to be my least favorite. Again, we just continue on, and again, it's just so outlandish, and it's just like, okay, when is this going to end? Then it'll be book number 9, which is from Pop's point of view. I did like seeing everything from his eyes, from when he was little all the way up to where he is today, to kind of figure out what was going on in his life as well. And then the last one is going to be the book number 10. I liked this one the most because it finally ended. And there's no way, I don't know how, after this ending, how they could make more. You know, I'm sure they always could. There's always something, but I don't know how they could make more, and I hope that they don't. Number 11 on my book list is probably going to forever and always get me kicked off of like Book Talk or any other sort of book thing, and that's going to be Bunny by Mona Awad. This is, when people say this is like Mean Girls, I agree. This is like Mean Girls. It's almost like Samantha is Caddy Herring, and her best friend that she has is going to be Janice, Ian, and then the girls, the bunny group, is going to be like the Mean Girls. Okay, Gretchen Wieners, Karen Smith, Regina George. That's what that reminds me of. There's obviously more of them, but that's what this book reminds me of. But also it has a little bit of like kind of Twilight themes as well, because they like make these like people that are like half human, half some kind of animal thing. So it kind of reminds me of Twilight in that aspect. And then it just kind of reminds me of like Cruel Intentions, how like all of these teachers think that like these girls are just like the best, you know, ever. Like there's nothing wrong with them, like they're perfect, you should aspire to want to be like them, and like, you know, frequently are asking them to like help out other people like within their classes and stuff. So in a way, just kind of while they're like literally force feeding poison and drugs to other people. Yeah, that's what it reminds me of, all three of those movies. I just did not think this lived up to the hype. I read the whole thing, and I at the end was just kind of like, wow, that book was kind of a bummer. I don't know, I just didn't care for it. If you liked it, like 1000%, that's totally fine. I just couldn't really get into it. It was just wasn't a vibe that I was feeling. Honestly, it was just so weird and cult-like, which are things that I do enjoy, but just the hybrid people was like a little bit much for me. I was like, okay, I could have done without that. And I just kind of felt like there were so many unanswered questions, which I guess is like the point of the book, but sometimes I like some sort of clarification, even if that will leave the rest of my mind to the imagination. And I just feel like that was just so open that I don't even know which way to go. Number 10, and I apologize now to any Colleen Hoover fans, but number 10 is going to be November 9 by Colleen Hoover. Oh, I just literally, obviously. Anyways, it's by Colleen Hoover, okay? I enjoyed this book, but there were just so many like cringy things about this where I was just like, ooh, red flag. Ooh, red flag. Like sometimes like the guy at the beginning, Fallon is the girl and Ben is the guy. So she meets Ben, and Fallon had like a really like traumatic past, and she meets Ben for one night, and then she's literally moving states away. She's moving like across the country, and they meet and they like fall in love this one night, and then they come up with this plan that they're just going to meet each other every November 9th so that way he can write this book because he wants to be a writer when he grows up. But just like some of the things that he like does or says is just kind of red flags. Some of the things that like she does and says too are also red flags, and it just kind of seems like some like part of the relationship is built on a lie as well. And you know, life continues and life moves on, and it was just I think it was like really beautiful. At the end I cried. That's why it's probably not ranked any lower, but like I bawled my eyes out at like the very end reading the letter and the book that he had written thus far, just like the sacrifices that like they were willing to make. But then at the same time I was just like, you are both so cringe. You are both just no. I don't think either of you were mature or ready for the relationship that you have or had. But you know, okay, it's either here or there. If you have read this, then you will know, but I will do like a book like in depth of this because it could have been so good if like the rest of it wasn't super cringy. Now we're going to start really getting into the books that like I really enjoyed. Not that I didn't enjoy the other ones, but these next ones are just like, this is like my bottom of the barrel like category. Now we're getting into the we're getting somewhere type of category. So that is going to be Living Dead Girl. Check trigger warnings. This was so good. I think I ranked it so much lower because of the ending. So with this is about a girl who is kidnapped by her abductor named Ray, and she's been with him for 5 years. And although I'm sure, you know, we're going to assume we know what happens when when a man kidnaps a little girl and keeps her held hostage for his own personal satisfaction, that we know what's going on. And it does like kind of give you some details, but it's never graphic, which I know there's some books where it can be very, very graphic. It's never really graphic. It's very just like, you know what's happening, but you don't have to be like super graphic. It doesn't tell you like positions, poses. It literally, it's just, he did this. Okay, moving on. And we're like moving on. So it's not super graphic. But I thought this was really, really good because it talks about how she even got kidnapped, because she was one of those kids that was always like, stranger danger. My parents always tell me about stranger danger. Can't talk to anybody that's a stranger, and things like that. And then how he still was able to like guilt her or trick her into coming home with him. And now he's starting to get bored with her because now she's growing up. She was kidnapped when she was like 9 or 10, and now she's 15 years old. And she knows that her time is running short. So she is now set out on a mission to find a younger person for him. And it was just really good. It was really eye-opening. It was so heart and soul crushing. But one thing that I hated about this was the ending. I was so mad at this ending. Like the ending that it gave, I was like, no. Like we were so close. We were so close. Number 8 is going to be A Flicker in the Dark. So I read this for my book club that I had started at my job. We all read this and it was really good. This really kept me on the edge of my seat. There were some like parts where I was just always like, I don't know what this has to do with anything, but it just comes back later. Like there's just I like in this book how everything like that starts at the beginning that you would think would be little pieces of information that aren't going to be important to the story come back later and are just as important then as they were now, or now as they were then, or just as important now as they were then. Yes, now as they were then, or just important now as they were then. Wow, I've said that so many times. But anyways, okay, but it just kept me really, really hooked. I think the thing that made this a little bit lower was that it kind of reels you into thinking like, oh, this is who it's going to be. Like all of these pieces are fitting together. And it just felt like it honed in so much on that one person without any sort of variety into who else it could be, who else the serial killer could be that is now starting to like murder girls around the area, that it almost was just like, it can't be this. Like there's no way I'm reading almost this whole entire book and it all leads to that one person. So I didn't like that. I wish it kind of brought in like little pieces of everyone. So it kind of left you a little bit more guessing. But at least with that, then I was like, okay, so it can't be this person and it can't be her. So who else is it? And so this book is about Chloe Davis. And when she was a teenager, 6 girls were murdered in her town, in her small little town. And for the longest time, no one could figure out who it was. And finally, she realizes it's her dad. She finds some clues that like says it's her dad. Her dad is now arrested. He's in prison. He is going to be there for a while. So he's in prison. And now 20 years later, more girls are dying in a very similar way, in a very similar fashion. And what I really liked about this book is that Chloe is kind of a unreliable narrator. There's parts that she can't really remember. There's parts that she flips around to like how she thinks things have happened without paying any attention to like it. That wasn't exactly how it happened. She also has like a Ativan problem and Xanax problem. So a lot of the time she just like conks out and has no idea what happened. And I thought this was really well done. I thought the ending was sad because it didn't really give like a lot of closure. It didn't like, it just seems like she just like loses everything. And it doesn't give any closure as to if she's going to like how she's going to rebuild her life and like move forward from here. And I wish that would have been there at the ending. Number 7 is going to be Aaron Beauregard's Playground. This is a very, very controversial book. It is super, super graphic, super, super gory. It does include like child death. It does include a scene in there between two adults that was, I guess, really disturbing to a lot of people. But if you took all of those things out, this was so good. This was a really, really, really good book. And I know like the gore and stuff in it was terrible, but this book is just so much more than that. But this is about where a lady wants to call in some low-income families to have them bring their children to go on like this state-of-the-art playground that she has invented. She's really rich and famous, and whatever kid, you know, at the end she'll pick, you know, who she wants to win and gift that state-of-the-art playground to a underpoverished area. And so all the families come, and, you know, immediately they take the kids out to this playground, and the parents are in like this like a movie theater where they're supposed to be watching the kids. And from there, the parents are now held hostage, and the kids are now having to play their way through this playground game. And throughout this, there is a lot of talk about like nature versus nurture. It talks about where each of the families came from, how they ended up going to this, what their home life is like. And that gives such a good overview of every child that's in there and how they play, every parent and how the parent acts the way that they do, and how the parents acting that way influences the children and how they play the game, how they care about others. And then, you know, it also talks about a lot about like, you know, I may have put up with this. I was adopted. I was nurtured into this way, but I know I'm not like that. I can change. I can be somebody completely different than my parents or parental figures in my life or guardians, whatever the case may be, have sat up for me, where I am 1000% able to change my life. And that's going to be really, really hard. And it may hurt to change. It may hurt to make those differences. And sometimes it can be life altering. It can be life changing, whatever the case may be. But I just thought it was so good, so well written. Like, honestly, if you aren't into gore or things like that, this is not going to be the book for you. But if you're one of those where you can read it, I think that this book has like a lot more to it than just gore. Like, if you can read it, like, this book has so much more to it. Number 6 is going to be The Hospital by Barbara O'Hare. So this is actually her memoir. This book is so sad. So she just like shares her life experience, especially with the abuse at Ashton Hall. So this talks about her life before, how she got to the hospital, her experience in the hospital, and then once she's out of the hospital, how she's trying to like make change and fight for like the justice of the people that were there. Okay, this was so sad. Her life originally was just not off to a good start, just to begin with. She came from like a really harsh childhood that was full of abuse and neglect, and finally, you know, she's taken into the foster care system, and she's staying at this place, and she thinks that going to this hospital is going to be even better. It's going to be so much better than there. The doctor that comes is just super nice to her, you know, gives her all these like cool little treats and things like that, and makes her really think that the hospital is going to be the best place for her. And when she gets there, she realizes that's not the case. They drug all of these girls. They do experiments on them. They assault the girls whenever they're under. They keep giving them these drugs where they're just like zombies basically the rest of the day. And then it talks about how she was finally able to escape and how she's trying to make changes, you know, even today, to try and fight. But when she tries to go back, there's never any records of certain people being there. Luckily, they were able to find her records, but all of the things that she's describing that happened aren't in the record books, and they're trying to tell her the doctor that you're accusing of doing this is an upstanding man. Like he was so innovative for our time. He really set the motion for like mental health care, and just it was like really just like hitting the home that like this doctor was so great, even though the nuns that were working at this hospital knew exactly what was happening, right? But he was such a great man, and I just thought my heart just broke for her. It was so sad, and it was such a really, really good book. Number 5 is going to be Keep It in the Family by John Mars. This book, it's a pretty long book, but I was so gripped from the very beginning. So this is going to be about Mia and Finn. They are living with Finn's parents currently because they're trying to find a place for them to live. It's really expensive. They're trying to save up for a house. And Mia falls pregnant. And finally, there's this home that's going to be for sale. Their parents were going to buy, Finn's parents were going to buy it. But Mia was like, hey, this is our chance to like get started. And so they bought the house, and they didn't realize, because they had never been inside this house. It was like a private auction where you just like bid based on the outside of the house. You don't know anything else about it. Well, it turns out that when they start doing the renovations, that up in the attic, they find a ton of children's bodies stuffed into suitcases. And so now they're freaking out, and now like the case is unfolding and family secrets are being revealed. And this was really good. It really, really kept my attention. It really grasped and like drug me in. I think just it in a way, it was really predictable as to what was going to happen pretty much from the beginning. But then at the end, I was not expecting the end at all. I was kind of expecting the end, but then I wasn't. And that turned out to be really, really good as well. This was a really well done book. John Mars has a way of just being able to write about a subject matter and really like get you into like your feelings about that subject, and really makes you think about like right versus wrong, and what you're willing to do to protect yourself or protect other people, or what secrets you're willing to bury. And this was no different. It was such a good book. Number 4 is going to be Wish You Were Here by Jodi Picoult. She's one of my all-time favorite authors. She's just so good. So we have Diana and we have Finn, and this is going to be the start of the pandemic. And she was really excited for this trip that they had booked, because she was like, I think he's going to finally propose to me. And she was so excited. But then COVID breaks out, and he is a med student. He's a resident. And he is like, I can't go on this trip any longer with you. You're going to have to go. And so she goes on this trip to an island, Galapagos. She goes to the Galapagos and meets a family, but everything there is shut down. And she doesn't know the language at all. So she's really struggling to like try to find herself, and she has no way to get in contact with Finn except for once in a while he'll send emails. And then eventually, she has to come back home, and she really just starts thinking about like life and everything that's going on around her. And it was a really, really good book. This book is just, Jodi Picoult just like writes about things all the time, but there was like a really huge twist in there, and then the ending coupled with it, I was just like, ooh, I need to know more. But it ended with that. But then I was just like, is this something normal? Like I don't know. It's hard to explain. If you've read it, you've read it. But it was just the twist right in the middle, right into part 2. I was just like, oh, okay, I was not expecting that. So then I was able to kind of like move on a little. But then at the very end, when the end throws in that zinger, like the very last sentence throws in that zinger, I'm just like, I need to have a minute. But it was so good. And it talks about like the terror that was happening for medical workers during the time of COVID. It talks about finding yourself in the midst of chaos, and how the life that you had intended for yourself may not be the direction, and like the values that you hold may not match with somebody else's values. And sometimes you may not realize what values you have until you're stuck in a situation such as the one that they were going through in the book, and really showing the difference and what they found to be important and what they didn't. It was a really, really, really good book. Highly recommend that. Number 3 is going to be Hooked. This book had me hooked. Okay, it just did. I read this in like less than 24 hours. It was so good. So this is kind of like an adult dark romance take on Peter Pan. So in this, there's a man named James who goes by Hooked. That's like his business, organization, street name kind of a thing. And he is after Peter Michaels, who is Wendy's dad. And he is trying to bring him down because they're both within a business together, and it's not going super well. So he tries to use Wendy to really get into there, but over time, like, their relationship starts to form. Wendy starts to really catch feelings, but James knows that he really needs to make sure that his business is top priority, and so he's willing to do whatever it takes. It's really good. You've got Peter Pan, you've got Wendy, you've got Michael, and there are times in there when it brings in something like a phrase or like a setting that just really reminds you of like the Peter Pan. But then just to watch, like, there's like action in here and like adventure, and the fact that it's usually like about like a drug cartel and like two businesses clashing and a traitor being within them, and a lot of that like action, but it has like the romance, and it has like the smutty scenes, and it has like a little bit of Disney flair to it as well. So this was a really, really, really good book. I'm excited to read the rest in my collection. Again, that had me hooked. I read that in less than 24 hours. It was chef's kiss, so good. Number 2 is going to be Just Like Mother. This book had me like drug in from the beginning. So this is about 2 girls. They consider themselves cousins, who as small children were part of a cult where it was just run by mothers. Everybody there, all the adults were called mother, and they would differentiate them based on their looks. So the mother with the red hair, or the mother with the cross eyes, or whatever the case may be. And they had never seen any men before, but except for there was a little boy. But all the other kids were all girls, and Boy was treated really different than everybody else. But Maeve, as a child, really wanted to take care of him. And there were like locked rooms where like weird noises were come out of. Luckily, they were able to escape that. And then it talks about how Maeve and Andrea, the 2 young girls, were then separated, went to foster care. She's now a struggling writer, editor, trying to, make money, make a name for herself, when finally she gets a match on, Ancestry.com or something like that, where Andrea was pinged as having really close DNA match to her, where it listed that they would be cousins, which is what they had thought. So they begin to meet up. And then just from there, just like really weird things are happening, or at least Maeve thinks so, but there's always like an explanation. Like everyone around her is able to give her like explanations to what's going on around her. But then it's just almost like it's so dark and eerie that these things are happening, especially like such a coincidence, like the things that happen. So slowly, like, the story just starts unraveling as they are like getting back together, and she's trying to like talk about and figure out about her life before, and Andrea is just very shut down, like, Maeve, I don't want to talk about that life. And then it just seems like Andrea works for like this $1 billion corporation that's like all about babies, and then she just keeps finding like more secrets about the business, about Andrea, her coworker Emily, her life. And although she thought she had left a cult, it feels like she's going back into one. This book just literally just kept grabbing me in. It was so enticing. I just kept wanting to know, like, what is happening? What is going to happen next? And I cannot stop watching. Watching it in my brain, but reading it, and I guess I could not stop reading it. It was just so good. So that is going to make my number 1 book for the month of August, Hidden Pictures. Oh my gosh, this is so good. So this is about Mallory, who has just gotten out of drug and alcohol. She had been to jail. She had gotten out. She was really working on being clean. She was an ex-addict, and it was actually her sponsor who had gotten her this job with the Maxwells, where she would go and she would be the live-in nanny for this little boy named Teddy. At least they were thinking just for the summer, until they could get him into school. And when she had the interview, she was like, there's no way I'm getting this job. But luckily she does, and she starts going and watching Teddy. Well, then she starts noticing that Teddy is drawing some very like interesting and really disturbing pictures. And every concern that she has, that she brings up with the Matthews about Teddy and the drawings or the things that he says, they completely and totally blow her off as if she's insane. And the really frustrating part is the mom is a psychiatrist or a psychologist, can't remember which. So she's always like, oh, that's a really normal part of development, or we would really like to like push things more in this direction, and not giving Mallory even like the time of day. But soon the pictures start becoming like more intense and a lot more graphic, and Mallory thinks that like the little boy is possessed and is trying to like get answers. And when I tell you, I was not prepared. I was not prepared for the ending. I was not, but I was so gut-wrenched about the ending too. I cried. Oh, did I cry? I cried so hard because it was just so sad to have to leave behind, where she had to leave him behind to give the little boy space. But like, I was not expecting this to be as good as it was, but it was so good, and the pictures just make it like so much better, because you could try to explain like a drawing through words, but to actually have like the drawings, let me see if I can pull one up. Okay, like you're probably looking at these and you are like, I have no idea what that has to do with anything, but then the drawings just slowly just start kind of getting better over time. It's very interesting. And then when the story just like all comes and you finally figure out like everything that had happened, I was just like, wow, a lot happened. That was a lot. It was so good. It was so good. I'm really hoping that next month in October, people will want to read that, because that was really good. That was so good. So that is ranking the 14 books that I have read in August. Have you read any of these? What books did you read in August? What books are you looking forward to reading in September? Let me know all of that down below. If you enjoyed this video, definitely make sure you guys have given this a thumbs up. If you have not yet already, I absolutely invite you to go ahead, click the subscribe button, click the little bell so you be notified of all my future uploads, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye!